Welcome everybody. It's so great to see you all here spending an evening to learn more about what Tiffany is presenting tonight. My name is Kelsey Bernard and I'm the Wildlife Coexistence Program Manager for the Cougar Conservancy. But before we dive into the program today, I just wanted to give some quick housekeeping reminders. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. Please keep your microphones muted. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the session using the chat feature, and we'll be addressing some of your questions during the Q&A session. And we also encourage utilizing the chat feature to just engage with speakers or other participants. But with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Karina to introduce tonight's program.
Thank you, Kelsey. And again, welcome everybody who's trickling in. I'm really glad you guys are able to spend an evening with us. Today's speaker, Dr. Tiffany Yap. I've worked with Tiffany over the last few years, and it's just always been a pleasure to work with her and also follow her amazing work through the center. So a little bit about Tiffany. Tiffany Yap is a senior scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity, where she works to protect imperiled species and enhance wildlife connectivity in the urban wildland interface. She holds a doctorate in environmental science and engineering and is the author of a young adult graphic novel, which she'll be talking about tonight, Tales of the Urban Wild, a Puma Journey. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tiffany. Tiffany, thank you so much for doing this presentation for the Cougar Conservancy tonight. We're really privileged to have you here with us.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. Thanks for inviting me. And so thank you to Cougar Conservancy, Karina and Kelsey, for being an awesome team and always fun and welcoming. So I really appreciate that. And thank you all for being here and joining me on the webinar. I think hopefully you guys find it fun and interesting. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what I'm doing when I talk. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Does that look good? Can everyone,
It looks great.
Does that look good? Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, so as I think Karina and Kelsey mentioned, today I'm going to talk to you about protecting pumas through science, policy, and art. And I think first what I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of background about myself as we get started. I've always loved animals. I've always been really fascinated with how people and wildlife interact and how we affect each other. And I've been really lucky to be able to work outside and learn so much about all the different or not all of the different animals, but a lot of different animals that live around us, particularly in California. And I really enjoyed spending that time outside and taking it all in, or as much as I could in. And so for a little while, I was doing things like I worked at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, where we would survey marine fisheries. So I would talk to a lot of different anglers, whether they were on boats or on docks or on the beach. And I would kind of identify the species, the fish that they were catching and measure them and stuff. And when I was in grad school, I did things like monitoring seaweeds and invertebrates on the Rocky Intertidal Zone. And then I also did, I studied the impacts of urbanized streams on native amphibians, and then also looked into how people affect disease risk in frogs and salamanders, particularly through wildlife trade. So it's been kind of like a variety of stuff, which has been really fun. And I feel really lucky that that I've been able to do that. And so after all that, I've been working at the Center for Biological Diversity now for, I just hit my 6-year mark, which is wild to me, but it's an environmental nonprofit. It's based out of Tucson, Arizona, but it's a national organization. I'm based in the Oakland office, which is why I'm not there with you in person tonight. It would have been fun if we could have had an in-person event, but I'm really glad this was an option. And the mission at the center is to secure a future for all species, great and small, by using science, law, and creative media to protect the lands, waters, and climate that species need to survive. And so since it was founded, we've been involved in over 600 endangered species listings and more than 400 million acres of habitat protected. And in our conservation work, we strive to be guided by available scientific data information. And while a lot of the work that the center does is nationally, a lot of the work that I do is in California. And in particular, I work in the Urban Wildlands program. So as Karina mentioned, I do a lot of work in the urban wildland interface and trying to protect species and habitats and wildlife connectivity in the urban wildland interface. So I thought it would be helpful to go over just a few quick definitions and also kind of provide a little bit of scientific information regarding what wildlife connectivity is and what the urban wildland interface is. So the urban wildland interface is the transition zone between human development and undeveloped wildlands. This could be your backyard or a nearby creek or a park that you go to with your friends. It's often a place where people have their first memories of interacting with nature. It's not just this faraway place. Like nature is not just this faraway place that you have to drive hours and hours or fly to. It's literally can be in our backyard or somewhere nearby. And it's really important to keep these ecosystems healthy because, you know, we are living amongst other wildlife. And so for them to be healthy, it also helps keep our communities healthy too. We have a really positive synergy when we can both be healthy communities. And there isn't really a sharp line between city and wildlife. And I think the way I think about it is it's where we share space with wildlife, but also where we have the most interactions with wildlife. And so I wanted to share these pictures. All these pictures either I took, or one is from the National Park Service, or from friends. And all of these pictures are from backyards. You know, so we have some species that are more common, like coyotes and bobcats, and often we'll see red-tailed hawks flying over cities. But on the bottom, there are species that are a little bit more cryptic. They often only come out at night or they live underground. So people might not know even that they're even there, but they do live among us. And you can see on the bottom, right, that's a California slender salamander. And it's on a shovel spade because it's in the yard. It was in the garden of my friend's, in my friend's backyard in the middle of San Francisco. And so I thought that was, I think it's just really fun and fascinating to know how close we live with so many cool critters. Okay. And so now I want to go over what wildlife connectivity is. This definition is from the Convention on Migratory Species, and they define it as the unimpeded movement of species and the flow of natural processes that sustain life on Earth. And there's lots of different types of connectivity. There are areas that are called core areas or patches, which are basically just large intact habitats where animals can kind of meander and roam freely. There's no designated pathways. They can just kind of roam around to find the resources they need. And it's pretty open. There are also linear corridors, which are a strip of continuous habitat between core areas. So that can be something like a stream. A lot of animals, including mountain lions, often will use riparian areas to travel from one habitat patch to another. That's really common. But it could also be something that's human-made. It could be a wildlife crossing, like the Wallace-Annenberg Bridge, or a culvert. Kind of any linear structure could be a linear corridor. And then there's stepping stone connectivity, which is small patches of habitat between core areas. And so that could be things like maybe people's backyards. If you plant native plants in there, that provides really great pollinator connectivity. It could also be, you know, big open areas, often of wetlands scattered throughout the coast for migratory birds. That's a very large scale stepping stones, but those are really important for migrating birds to rest or feed on their journey. So there are lots of different ways that connectivity kind of manifests on the landscape. And oftentimes it's a mix of all these things. Okay, so why is it important? Well, it's important because animals need to find resources to survive. So they need things like food, water, shelter, unrelated mates. And it's even important for pollination. So even if the plants aren't getting up and moving on their own, the animals that are moving through these areas will help with pollination. And so connectivity is really important for plant diversity and plant gene flow. And so, yes, gene flow is also really good for healthy populations. And connectivity can also support different life stages. So for example, with a lot of frogs and salamanders, you know, they breed in the water, their eggs and their young survive in the water. And then when they metamorphose, the adults need to live on land. And so they need connectivity between those different kinds of habitats. That's just one example. And then connectivity is really important for resilience to climate change. As the resources on the landscape shift, depending on the different microclimates or how things are changing, animals need to be able to follow those resources. And the way they can do that is if we have enough connectivity for them so that they can find the new resources elsewhere. And then connectivity is also important for public health and safety, because again, healthy ecosystems help keep our communities healthy too. So I alluded to this a little bit ago, but there's multiple scales of connectivity. There's the local connectivity for the small rodents and small mammals and lots of different amphibians and reptiles where they don't move as far. They have smaller home ranges. Maybe their young don't disperse that far. And so they need connectivity at a local scale. And then there's regional connectivity. So these are more wide-ranging animals. There's a bobcat kitten, but also mountain lions really need regional connectivity, desert tortoise, even butterflies like the Kino checker spot butterfly needs regional connectivity. And they have bigger home ranges. Maybe they need more resources, so they need more area to get all the resources they need. And so regional connectivity is really important for them. And then there's continental connectivity. So I don't know if everyone is in California right now, but for those of you who are in California and for us on the West Coast, we are a very big part of the Pacific Flyway, where millions of birds travel up and down our coast every year to get to whether it's their breeding areas or their summer ranges. And some even go beyond to South America. So it's like multiple continent connectivity. But so it's really important to have the resources, again, for them available so that they can rest, feed, or have their young in these areas. And it's not just birds that migrate, bats also migrate, and also monarchs, which I think are, a lot of people really love monarchs. And they have a really amazing migration pattern. They come from Mexico, they go all the way up to Canada, but they also go through California. And so there's just connectivity is at every scale, and it's important in different ways depending on the situation. So one of the ways that people and our infrastructure affects wildlife connectivity, one big way that's like very kind of easy to see is our roads. So our roads, when they were built, people weren't really thinking about, they didn't really have wildlife movement in mind or wildlife behavior, and so the roads often slice through important habitat for a wide variety of species. Oftentimes when we think about roadkill, it's either like small mammals like squirrels, but oftentimes it's the more dangerous ones for people. So deer, collisions with deer, collisions with mountain lions, collisions with the larger mammals is something that happens a lot. But what also, and has a lot of visibility. But what is also happening on our roads is so many other types of species are being affected. We have from fish birds, insects. There's so many different animals that are unfortunately being hurt on our roads just because we didn't know how to plan them in a way that would be less harmful. And we do have some idea as to the how to quantify the impact of our roads on animals, but it is pretty limited. But what we do have can be really informative, right? So the UC Davis Road Ecology Center has a database that puts together reported basically roadkill observations. And they use that system to kind of estimate what's going on state highways in California. And so what they found, whether it was through that database or through reports from the California Highway Patrol, what they found was from 2016 to 2020, there were about 44,000 reported collisions on our roads, and about 75 to 100 Pumas are reported killed on the roads every year. And they estimate that the costs of these collisions, which includes property damage, but also hospitalizations and things like that, that costs about $1 billion per year. I think that's wrong. I think it's $1 billion from 2016 to 2020, but it's a lot. And what's really concerning is that oftentimes these kinds of collisions go unreported. And so we've seen in other states that the underreporting can be 3 to 10-fold. So that means this issue and the costs from this issue can be much, much greater. And most of the data that we have is for large mammals, but there's, like I said, all sorts of species that are being unfortunately impacted by these roads. And so, you know, one study estimated that up to 340 million birds are killed on our roads every year, and that's throughout the US. And we don't even really know what's going on with amphibians and reptiles or small mammals or insects. But we do know that a lot of animals in those groups are in decline. And so just to give you an example of the impact it can have on smaller critters, I really like highlighting this project. It's a iNaturalist community science project where someone noticed a few dead newts on the road that they walk on along Lexington Reservoir in Santa Clara County. And she decided that she was going to start documenting the roadkill as much as possible to see what the issue was. And she got a group together, and every year the volunteer group grows. And what they found was between 2018 and 2023, more than 30,000 Pacific newts were found killed on just this 4-mile stretch of road. And Pacific newts are California newts and rough-skinned newts. And so I think this was a big eye-opener to the impact that we can have on just this one population of newts, or I guess 2 populations because they're 2 different species, but and like the power of community science, because this issue has now been brought up and now they're trying to address it. And so I know I just went over a bunch of really kind of sad statistics, but I think, and I hope that you guys find this hopeful. I find it hopeful. We do have solutions. We do know of ways where we can improve connectivity on our roads to make it safer for wildlife to cross our roads and get to the resources they need, but also make it safer for people driving on those roads. And so that is wildlife crossings, right? They can be wildlife bridges, they could be under crossings, they can be culverts. There's all these different tools at our disposal that we can implement to improve, to make our roads safer for wildlife and people. And these kinds of crossings can really benefit a wide variety of species. And sometimes each kind of location and each species and each situation can be different, right? The geography might be different. You know, maybe it's not really possible to build a big wildlife bridge or undercrossing. And so what's really great is there are researchers out there that continue to look for different ways to protect species and continue to innovate to make our roads safer. And so I just wanted to show this example. This is an elevated road that was created in an area in the Sierra National Forest where Yosemite toads, which are an endangered species, were being hit by cars. And so the researchers at USGS got together and they designed this elevated road. They put directional fencing to kind of guide the animals to this really small undercrossing that was probably, I want to say 20 feet wide, but I'd have to go back and look. And what was really cool though and exciting is what they found is that it worked. And not only were Yosemite toads using this elevated road undercrossing, but a lot of other smaller critters like that fixture were also using it. They saw lots of snakes, lots of salamanders. I think shrews were using it. So this was a really great win and a really cool study. And now they're trying to kind of find ways to standardize it so that it can be implemented in other areas where it might be helpful. And then, of course, there's also already a lot of existing culverts, but sometimes they may not be that useful to animals. And so one kind of more economical way to get these crossings to be used is to just retrofit them a little bit. And so these are crossings on Route 118 in Ventura County. And Caltrans, they just built ramps to the culverts and immediately they started seeing all sorts of wildlife using it. And so it's really great to have these tools. We know that animals use them if they're designed properly. You just need to have it be thoughtful for the species you're trying to help, but then it can work. And so that to me, I think is really exciting. Okay. So that was hopefully a brief overview of some of the science behind what we're doing when we talk about wildlife connectivity and when we try to protect wildlife connectivity, and kind of why it's important for all types of species so that they can survive, and also how we can improve it. And so now I'm going to dive into the more specific Puma protection work that I know many of you were hoping to hear about. So here we go. So this is in 2019, we petitioned to list Southern California and Central Coast mountain lions as threatened under the California Endangered Species Act. And so it's also known as CISA. So if I mention it again, I'll probably say CISA. And the reason we felt that it was important to get extra protections under CISA for these mountain lions was because in 2018, a study came out showing that there were 9 to 10 distinct genetic populations of mountain lions throughout the state of California. And what was happening is they're being boxed in by roads and development, which is causing them to become isolated. And so each color on this map is a different genetically distinct population. And the populations that we're most concerned about are the Central Coast and Southern California mountain lions. And so that goes basically, so the black color is the Santa Cruz Mountains. And then you go down along the coast, and if you see the Central Coast South, that's a green population. That's where the Santa Monica Mountains is. And then you have the San Gabriel, San Bernardinos, and then that turquoise color is the Santa Ana population, and then the Eastern Peninsula Range. So those are the 6 populations that we're most worried about. And we're worried about them because they're experiencing an extinction vortex that's 100% human caused, right? The threats of this extinction vortex include things like genetic isolation, again, due to roads and development boxing them in and separating them from other mountain lions. They're getting hit on roads. They're being killed in retaliation for depredation events, killing farm animals and pets. They're also dying from rat poisons. They're getting poached. They're dying from disease. They are dying in wildfires, which you would think they're pretty mobile and they could run from them. But unfortunately, because they're so boxed in, sometimes it's hard for them to find an escape route. And then climate change is also another threat because habitats are changing and we're continuing to develop into mountain lion habitat. And so the primary driver of that of this extinction vortex is lack of connectivity. And another thing I wanted to mention is another study came out in 2019 where they found that the populations in the Santa Monica Mountains and the Santa Ana Mountains, the inbreeding was so high and the genetic diversity was so low in those populations that if inbreeding depression occurred, then they predicted that those mountain lions, those local populations would go extinct within 50 years. And what's really scary is since then, in 2022, another study came out where they documented signs of inbreeding depression. So kinked tails are a very, are like one sign of inbreeding depression. Is something that was seen in the Florida panthers, which were endangered, and their population was getting so low that they actually took mountain lions from Texas and brought them to Florida to try to recover them. And they're doing a little better now that with that additional gene flow. But for a while, it was getting really, really, really bad. And so not only were they seeing these kinked tails, but they were also seeing abnormal sperm. And so as inbreeding depression gets worse, oftentimes what we'll see is reproductive issues, or the kittens will be born with congenital diseases that so they can't really survive. And so once that happens, the extinction can happen really quickly. And so that's something that we're really worried about and we're constantly trying to keep an eye on. Okay, so why protect mountain lions? Why care? And I think everyone on this call probably they already care a lot. So, or you all really care a lot. But just to reiterate it, they do have intrinsic value. They are an iconic species. A lot of people love mountain lions a lot, so they have cultural value. And they're also known as ecosystem engineers or keystone species. So their kills, which are often deer, are a reliable food source for them, but also for a lot of other species, a lot of scavengers, bears, foxes, different types of raptors, many, many different types of beetles and invertebrates rely on their kills for food source. Their presence modifies the behavior of prey animals like deer, but also other carnivores like bobcats and coyotes. And so by modifying their behaviors, they have an effect on the landscape. Maybe deer or other grazing animals aren't going to eat that vegetation so low. And so maybe that affects how stream banks are and how the streams are. So things like that. And then a study came out in 2022 as well, where they found that mountain lions in one way or another interacted with about almost 500 different species of animals. And so they're really important to support biodiversity. And again, protecting them by improving wildlife connectivity, by building more wildlife crossings or making developments more wildlife friendly, makes it safer for them, but also for people. Okay, so what would a CISA listing do? Well, it would allow us to put more policies and practices in place that focus on safe coexistence. It's another tool that can help us preserve and enhance connectivity by making infrastructure more wildlife friendly. So again, getting more wildlife crossings out there, avoiding development in high priority connectivity areas, minimizing noise and lighting at night so that they are able to roam more freely. It also gives us more resources to help us reduce conflict with people, which I think is probably something you all are very interested in. and the Cougar Conservancy has been doing such a great job with. You know, getting more education out there about keeping pets indoors at night. You know, keeping animals in predator-proof enclosures at night. Using guard dogs if it's appropriate. And it would also allow for more research on non-lethal deterrence methods. There are a lot of things that we know that can help, but there are things that we could know more about. And so I think being able to get more research and more understanding as to how these Pumas are reacting to different things can be really helpful in the quest for safe coexistence. And it would be another tool to also help limit rat poisons from the landscape, which are harmful to mountain lions, but they're also harmful to a lot of other predators because they get secondary poisoning from the animals that have eaten the rat poisons. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the timeline for the CISA process, I don't want to go too much into the details of the CISA process, but if anyone has any questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. But basically, we filed the petition with the Mountain Lion Foundation in 2019. And then in 2020, and so went to the California Fish and Game Commission. And then in 2020, the Fish and Game Commission voted unanimously to advance them to candidacy. And so again, that's just those 6 populations of the Central Coast and Southern California Pumas. And in advancing them to candidacy, the CISA protections apply temporarily until another vote is taken. But before that vote is taken, CDFW needs to conduct a status review and basically provide a recommendation to the commission as to whether or not to formally list the species under CISA. And so we're expecting that to happen sometime this year. That's the hope. So in addition to doing the work with the CISA petition, we also do a lot of policy work. And these are just a few examples of the ones that I thought were kind of most relevant and maybe of most interest to y'all. So this is some of the legislation and ordinances. We, as sponsors of the bill, have passed several over the last couple of years regarding that are beneficial to Pumas. And so one is the Safe Roads and Wildlife Protection Act, which was passed in 2022. That's AB 2344. And that basically requires Caltrans and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to work together to identify priority connectivity areas to put wildlife crossings and to implement them into new projects. And then the California Ecosystems Protection Acts of 2020 and 2023 restrict anticoagulant rodenticides from certain areas on the landscape. So those were bills that were already passed. And right now we're working on several bills, which a couple of those meetings just happened this week, which was really great. But one is the Room to Roam Act. That's AB 1889, and that requires cities and counties to consider wildlife connectivity in their general plans. And then the Poison Free Wildlife Act, which is AB 2552, which would further restrict rat poisons on the landscape. And then we've also been very supportive of regional ordinances, particularly in Ventura County. They had a wildlife movement and habitat connectivity ordinances that we really supported and pushed for. And once it was passed, industry filed a lawsuit against the county for passing these ordinances. And so when that happened, the center intervened and fought on behalf of the county to make sure these wildlife movement and habitat connectivity ordinances stay in place. And we recently got a victory on that. So that was really exciting. That was like a few months ago, I think. And then we've been working with the city of LA on a wildlife ordinance, really hoping to move that forward in a positive way. So there's that. And then another thing we do to try to protect mountain lions in California is we fight poorly planned development. often using the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA is what we call it because it's much shorter. And so I'm not going to go over all these different projects, but I just wanted to kind of list out a few of the more recent ones where we've had some victories, whether it was legal agreements to protect habitat or important connectivity areas, or where the projects were blocked by a judge because of our arguments for wildlife connectivity. And often there are other things at play. So if you are reading through this, you'll notice that not only are we trying to protect mountain lions in these areas, but there are other species as well that are really sensitive, that are being really, that would be really impacted by these projects. So think like western spadefoot toads, or Kino checker spot butterfly, foothill yellow-legged frog, oak woodlands and riparian corridors. And so yeah, so these are just some examples. And again, if folks have more questions or want more details, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay, and let's hope that this goes. Yeah, okay. And so another thing that we do is support connectivity enhancement projects or connectivity research projects. So again, there's, I listed some here, and all of the crossings that we've been supportive of would help different Pumas in different locations, whether it's in the Santa Anas, the Santa Monicas, or the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is kind of where a lot of the struggle is going on right now for Pumas. And the way we do that is through supporting grant proposals, whether it's for construction or research or implementation or the environmental, the CEQA process. So there's lots of different steps that often need to be taken to get a crossing built. And so we try to be as supportive as we can. And maybe I played that video too early, but I wanted to show you that that was the Laurel Curve crossing under Highway 17 in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And that was built, that just got completed last year. And in November of 2023, they saw their first Puma use it. And so that was a pretty exciting, to see. Okay, and so now we're at the art section of the talk. And so let's see, an opportunity came up to write a graphic novel after the publisher reached out to me and said he had read an op-ed that I had written about mountain lions and wolves and the importance of wildlife connectivity in California. And he asked me if I would be interested in writing a graphic novel about the environment. And that seemed like a really broad topic, but I think in the back of my mind, I always knew what it was going to be about, because I've been doing so much work on mountain lions, and it can be pretty, I mostly stay hopeful, but sometimes it can be really hard. And I'm sure you all feel the same when you hear about another mountain lion was hit on the road, or another mountain lion died from rat poisons. It can be really challenging to figure a way out. And I think I thought, well, writing a graphic novel about the plight of mountain lions and the struggles they go through in the urban wildland interface could be a really cool way to get the messaging out there and to advocate more for their protection, and to maybe help people connect more with Pumas or other wildlife in California, and maybe the struggles they face and the impacts we have on them. And so we landed, after I thought about it for a little bit, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to be able to tell this story of all the challenges they face while also highlighting the amazing biodiversity in California through this story, and all the people that live here through this story of a young male mountain lion who disperses from his mom and tries to find his own territory. And so luckily the publisher was interested, and we were able to find Maytal Smith, who is like an amazingly talented artist, to team up with me and work with me on this. And I really wanted to make this story and the things that happen in the story as scientifically accurate as possible. And so it could be used as an educational tool, but also be read like an entertaining story. And so I'm going to show you a couple of pages just to give you some examples of kind of what I was trying to do, and you can see what you think. And I will say, actually, sorry, before I go over the examples, like this Puma, he faces a lot of the things I just talked about. He faces, you know, dangerous roads. He comes across wildfire. He comes across rat poisons. He comes across conflict with farm animals. You know, there's lots of different people interacting with him. But the stuff I'm going to show you, I think, was really informed by the work that Cougar Conservancy does. And so I wanted to show this piece as an homage to you guys and all the people, to Karina and to Kelsey, but also to all the volunteers that kind of go out there and really help, you know, make life better for pumas in the urban wildland interface. So, okay. So one thing, as I mentioned, I wanted the book to be scientifically accurate. So, some of the book involves like showing the biology and the ecology and the behavior of mountain lions. So here on this page, you can see at the top, a puma has killed a deer. She already ate a little bit, and then she's caching it. She's done eating and she's caching it. And and then she leaves and she goes to her den where there are two kittens waiting. And so the main character is that little kitten that's greeting her first, and communicate with chirping to each other. They're actually quite communicative with each other. And then to show some of the denning behavior. So these, and the parental care. So these two brothers will spend 1 to 2 years with their mom, relying on her for food and learning how to survive. And then a little bit more denning behavior with she's taking care of them, but also she knows that she needs to move them. She can't stay in one spot all the time. She moves the den every few days because adult male pumas or other predators might kill the kittens. And so she wants to keep them hidden while she goes hunting. And then here is, let's see how we're on time. Okay. So here this is like, there are all these like really cool facts, or what I thought were cool facts and I thought were really fascinating that I wanted to share with the reader that didn't necessarily fit into the story. And so what what Maytal and I came up with was, well, what if we make it look like a scientific journal? And it's like someone's notes, and it's just this cool information that is not in the story, but integrates into the story. And so I thought that was a really great idea, and we went with it. And so here are a couple of pages that show why pumas are important. They support biodiversity, and this kind of covers what I talked about earlier, right? Their kills are really, they're a keystone species, and their kills are really important for so many different kinds of animals, whether it's bears and foxes, raptors. And there's really cool wildlife camera studies where they found even songbirds like ruby-crowned kinglets and downy woodpeckers feed on these carcasses. And then also there are all these beetles and even vegetation, microbial communities and mycorrhizal networks, trees, they all benefit from these kills too by getting nutrients from them. And then I also really wanted to highlight the scientists it's an incredible amount of work, and I'm always in awe when I learn something new, when I read their studies, when I hear about their stories. And so I thought it would be really cool to give a window into what kind of work goes into studying these animals, right? And so there are 3 scientists in the story who catch and collar the main character, who becomes CH, that is his name, or his tag. And so the reader kind of learns with the scientists, along with the scientists, as they follow him. And so here they are, they saw him on a wildlife camera, and they set up a trap nearby, and then they're waiting to catch him, hoping that he goes into the trap they set up. And he does. And so once that happens, they move very quickly to process him, because they want to limit the amount of time they're with the animal, because that's best for the animal. And, you know, just kind of wanted to show them putting the radio collar on and taking all the measurements and taking blood samples for their studies. And then, you know, once C8 has, I mean, he's dispersed from his mom already, and he gets pushed further and further away from prime habitat by the larger territorial males, which puts him closer and closer to human modified landscapes. So here he is kind of exploring these new areas. And this is where I think /hope you guys might be interested in. Unfortunately, he also comes across some animals that are not in a predator-proof enclosure. And so what could that look like? And here it is. And I think I think it's important to show that these kinds of things happen. And it's important to have compassion for the animals that it's happening to, including C8, but also have compassion for the people who are involved that it's happening to them too. And so here are the animal owners finding out that their poor little goats were killed, and then calling in experts to help figure out what was happening and what they can do to prevent something like this from happening again. And so here's the team that you know, teaches them and works with them to build predator-proof enclosures, including closing the top off, but also making sure to put that protective netting underground too, for animals that dig, or predators that dig, like coyotes. And here's what it looks like once it's completed. And you can see that C8, he's actually back in the area, and he tries to get in, but he can't get in on the top. And then coyotes also come in, but they can't get in underneath either. And the sheep are happy and sleeping peacefully. And then I also in the book wanted to highlight that, you know, there's more to learn, that we're continuing to learn, right? And so there was an appendix. This is part of the appendix that talks about like other issues and then other solutions. And so I wanted to show that, like, well, yeah, guard dogs at the top, they can be helpful. They're not helpful in every situation, but sometimes they can be really helpful. It just really depends. And then I really like this study that was done in Botswana, where they found that painting eyes on the backs of cows might deter lions and leopards from attacking. And so could that be effective for California carnivores? Just kind of something I thought that was fun and interesting to think about. And so just to recap, this was just, I hope you got some information into, or at least a small window into the work that I've been doing at the Center for Biological Diversity to protect pumas. Again, we did that CISA petition, and then we're always trying to get science-driven legislation and ordinances passed, either statewide or regionally. And we fight bad development projects and advocate for connectivity enhancement projects and research. And then also we try to advocate through creative storytelling. And so that's it. Thank you so much for listening and attending this. And I want to thank the illustrator, Maytal Smith, because she is amazing, and I couldn't have done this graphic novel project without her. And Reverberations Books was a publisher. It's an imprint of Chin Music Press. And then, of course, super thanks to all the researchers and advocates and folks on the ground doing the work to make this place better for pumas and for people. So I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. I must stop
Thank you
sharing my
so much.
screen.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Your book is just absolutely beautiful. It's so important, and I think you'll really be engaging entirely new audiences through this specific medium. So, and your illustrator, I mean, come on, this book is just, it's gorgeous. So a lot of folks were asking in the chat where they can go and purchase this book. And so let's start off with the Q&A there, because I think some people actually purchased it while you were talking, but I know some.
Oh, yay! That's amazing. Sorry, I'm realizing I'm getting fuzzy, and I think because it's dark in here, but I don't know, my light's not working. So sorry.
That's okay. I can see you
Okay.
perfect. So
Okay. Yeah, well, so you can get the book. Oh, there we go. There's the light. Thank you. I don't even know if that helped, but anyway. So you can, oh, amazing. Thank you so much. So you can buy it wherever books are sold. If you like, if there's a local bookstore that you like to support, I super recommend that. I actually, maybe I'll share my screen again because I shared a QR code that goes to
perfect.
where it could be, but sorry, no, I don't know how to use anything because
no problem at all. No, that was such a fantastic talk, Tiffany, and
there we go.
you covered so much about what the center does, and I just want to take a moment while folks are using the QR code on their end to purchase the book or find a place online to purchase it. You cover so many different things in the book. You cover so much of the stuff that the center does, and it's just so amazing to see the work that the center's doing. And all of this stuff is such an important piece of the conservation puzzle for cougars, especially the policy work that CBD really takes a big lead on. So thank you for your entire team. Thank you for your work, and thanks for your incredible team that does this work, not just throughout the state of California, but countrywide as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I mean, I just want to reiterate the thanks to you and the work that you all do. I think it's really important, and it often is not something that is on top of everyone's mind when we talk about wildlife connectivity, but it is a huge piece of that. Because if we're always talking about safe coexistence, I think it's really important to understand what that looks like and how that feels for people where it's affecting them the most. And so I think what y'all are doing is really important.
Thank you. Yeah, the wildlife friendly infrastructure coupled with social tolerance and education, works together hand in hand. And you can't have one without the other. So it's great. So let's get to some of these Q&A, some questions that we got into the Q&A here.
Sure.
Let's see here. So Francis is wondering, while we're working to build crossings, can you please talk about wild safety road signs on our highways? For example, Florida panthers and Texas ocelots.
I'm sorry, that question is about signage?
Yes,
Is that
wild safety road signage.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I may have mentioned most of what I do is in California. So I'm not super familiar with the signage that's going on for Florida panthers and ocelots. What I will say is, though, based on what I've read for signage generally, is that it can be kind of hit or miss. Like sometimes it's really helpful to bring more awareness to people, to drivers, and sometimes in the beginning, drivers will slow down. Like when the sign is new, drivers will slow down and try to be more careful. But as time passes, often what happens is they kind of acclimate to the signs and almost ignore them. And so, the speeds go up again, and it kind of doesn't do as much as I think all of us would like. I've seen that with a lot of newt crossing signs, but also, just general wildlife crossing signs. And so I think what's really helpful is if we have that signage in addition to some type of crossing. Because then I think it brings the awareness of, oh, there's a crossing here because wildlife move through here, even if I don't see them. And so maybe I'll see them on the side of the road. And I think, oh, there was something else that I was gonna say too, but I forget. Anyway, I think that's one way that signage can be really more effective if it's like an educational component to something else. Oh, I remember what else I was gonna say. There are some places where roads get closed for some of the season. And oftentimes, you know, people in the area might not be that happy that the road is closed because maybe it makes their commute 10 minutes longer.
Right.
Or it's not the route that they like to take. And I think, again, with that road closure and signage, then I think more people can understand what's going on and why they're not allowed to drive on this road. And it even leads to, you know, community members going there and walking there to look for the wildlife, right? So I think it helps create a connection that we're not the only ones on the road and we're not the only ones using the road. But I think oftentimes it has to be coupled with another action.
Education. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I love that opportunity too, that signage may bring opportunities for community engagement that may otherwise be absent in the absence of signage. So no, that's a great question. Okay, wonderful. So Sandy Bell here is asking, does Puma birth defects, is it caused by pollution or is it one factor of a birth defect?
That's a great question. So I think it could vary. The birth defects that we're most concerned with, at least in California, is the low genetic diversity and that high level of inbreeding. Because when that happens, that's when birth defects can become more prominent. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Sorry, that's a short answer. But
no, and it's a complicated topic as well.
Yeah.
I'll add to that as well, because one part of that question was pollution, and some of the things that we may be seeing, especially with Florida panthers, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has been investigating a disorder that they've been seeing in Florida panthers and bobcats in the last few years, and they've named this sort of rear leg weakness and wobbliness. They've named it FLM, and I'm not going to try and say the whole name, but you can read more about FLM on the FWC, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission website if you go to the Florida Panther landing page, because some of the defects that we may be seeing may be actually attributed to pollution. But I think a lot of Tiffany's talk was touching on that genetic restriction causing those physical abnormalities like the deformed sperm, the non-descended testes. And in the case of the Florida panther a long time ago, the hole in the heart, the twisted spleen, and of course, other things like the cowlick, which doesn't impact a mountain lion's ability to survive and reproduce, unless a female panther may not think it's sexy. But anyways. Those are really good points, and it actually made me think of these other things that are just, you know, something to consider, but I don't know that we have anything conclusive on it yet. But there was a study that came out a couple of years ago from the Santa Cruz Mountains where they were finding, I think it was mercury in the fog that was then ending up in the bloodstreams of mountain lions in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So there's that, and then also there's rat poisons. I think I want to say it was last year, but it might have been 2 years ago, where there was a puma that was hit on the road. It was a female and she was pregnant, and they found evidence of rat poisons in her blood and also in the fetuses. And so super heartbreaking, really hard to know, really hard to conclude anything there, but I think those are definitely other concerns that might relate to the question. Okay, so Natalie's asking here, I saw salamander on the upper right of your screen on one of the slides. Is that a California newt? And Natalie lives in the San Fernando Valley. Do you remember the slide you were on?
Let's see if I can, let me go through. Sorry, I always have to, I don't know if you, okay, anyway, okay. there are a couple, so I think you may have guessed that I am a big fan of salamanders. So there are salamanders scattered throughout this talk.
And on the cover.
And on the cover. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. And I think, that was the whole thing about really highlighting the biodiversity in California. I think another thing that's really great about pumas is that they are an umbrella species. Helping them can help so many other species. And like through this book, I was telling a story about this one puma, but I got to highlight all the cool animals that I like and that I think are fun. And I did a lot of work with frogs and salamanders. So of course there's going to be a salamander on the cover. Anyway,
I love it.
So this one, there's an arboreal salamander right in the middle here. I don't know if you can see my arrow.
So cute. Look at those eyes.
I know. And then we also, maybe I think you were asking about this one, Natalie. So was it Natalie that asked that?
Yeah.
Okay. So very close. This is not a California newt. It is a yellow-eyed ensatina.
Beautiful.
And what's fun is they mimic California newts so California newts have those bright orange bellies, but they're kind of dull. They look like the ensatina. They're dull on the top, but they have these bright orange bellies to show that they're toxic. So predators won't eat them. So if they feel threatened, they'll do this Unkin reflex and expose their orange bellies to say, I'm really bright. You don't want to eat me. I'll make you sick. And these ensatinas are not toxic, but they like to pretend they are. So they mimic the California newts as a way to get away from predators.
Amazing. And then that little guy in the middle, I mean, we could spend all day just talking about this one slide. It shoots blood out of its eyes. So
yeah. Animals are
it.
so fascinating.
Herps are cool. Reptiles and amphibians are amazing. Let's see. So we are on time at 7:35. Perhaps we can take maybe one or two more questions. It looks like there's a question from Gwen here on policy. I don't know, maybe we can answer it quickly, but do you find that there's resistance to AB 1889 and 2552? And do you think that they'll pass easily?
These are very good questions.
Yeah.
I think we definitely don't want to take anything for granted. And so what's nice is we do have some momentum when it comes to wildlife connectivity. More and more people know what it is or have heard it before. And I think that's really helpful, especially with AB 2344 passing in 2022. That said, yes, there is opposition. And I think it's something to carefully navigate. I'm going to speak more about 1889. I think having those requirements for cities and counties to consider wildlife connectivity in general plans would be really huge, really amazing, really helpful when it comes, because it'll allow for a more holistic and comprehensive approach to city planning and county planning and urban development, where we developing, where and why and how we develop. And so I think it's really important, and we really do want to push for it. But there is, I don't think it'll be easy, but we're still going to try to get it through as best we can.
Yeah. And how do people support on that? Can they go to your guys' website, follow you on social media, things like that? Or what's the best way that they can engage?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one way to engage is we often will do when hearings come up, having letters of support from the public is really helpful. And so sometimes what we'll do is we'll have links to action alerts that kind of guide you to who to send it to, and maybe provide a template. And so I think maybe the best way to do that, I'm gonna go back to the last slide because it had my email.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
I don't know, but a faster way to do that. So sorry if I made folks a little bit motion sick just then. But so there's my email. And then I can try to connect you with like an email listserv, I think, that that can let you know when those kinds of things are out or happening.
Fantastic. Well, I want to be sensitive of everybody's time this evening. You can, of course, always go to the Center for Biological Diversity's website and make a donation there to support their work. So again, thank you for all your work, Tiffany, and for your team's work. You guys are doing some amazing things and really pushing the envelope and really setting, I think, a new precedent and changing culture as much as you are actually passing bills and things like that. So thank you again for spending your evening with us. And if anybody enjoyed today's program and would like to support the Cougar Conservancy continuing to offer educational opportunities such as this one, you can always make a donation at our website as well. Sign up for our newsletter, sign up for the center's newsletter, and let's keep engaging beyond this presentation to, again, conserve the animals that we care about and help communities coexist with them. So with that, I bid everybody a wonderful evening, and thank you so much again, Tiffany.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everyone.